Let's return to This Week in America. Here's your host, Rick Bratton.
Welcome back, everybody. Coast to Coast, This Week in America. The powerful love story Evermore by Margaret Krivchenia tells the sweeping story of the Mayer and Sharples families and how their lives intertwine through love, joys, sorrows, and tragedies. The story is set in the Finger Lakes region of upstate New York. It spans the decades from the 1930s to the beginning of the new millennium. The meeting of 15-year-old Lizbeth with 17-year-old Ian Sharples sparks a series of events that will change their lives forever. Their young, unforgettable love is the subject of legends, but unrelenting forces are aligned against them. As they struggle to keep their love, they're caught in a whirlwind of tragedy that ultimately tears them apart. Evermore is a story of love that brings salvation, redemption, and God's healing grace as He walks us through our suffering and ultimately into His peaceful heart. Margaret grew up in Michigan, received a BA from Wayne State University in Detroit, her MA from the University of Michigan, a former high school guidance counselor. Evermore is her first novel. Margaret and her family live in Florida with her husband, which includes 4 grandchildren, the inspiration for the Four Cousins Mystery Series. And Margaret Krivchenia, singer, songwriter, actor, landscape painter, and author of Evermore, is our guest on This Week in America. Margaret, welcome to the program. A pleasure to have you with us.
Well, thank you so much. It's an honor to be here and to share my love for books.
Well, yes, in so many books you've written, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation today, focusing on the new book, The Powerful Love Story, Evermore. Talk to me about the inspiration of Evermore. I love the story. I love the characters. What was the inspiration for the story?
Well, actually, it comes from my family. My grandparents lived with us, and both my mother and my grandmother were great storytellers. So they would talk about their lives as children growing up, my mother in particular growing up in a funeral home where her father ran a funeral business and she lived upstairs. My grandmother had a large family, would tell me all about what was going on in the various family members. So they really came alive to me. And even though I grew up in Detroit, we would travel every summer back to the Finger Lakes region in upstate New York to a little town called Auburn on Owasco Lake, which I renamed Shimmering Falls in my novel. And those people that she told me about just came alive for me. And so as I got older, my mother always filled the house with books, and she loved to do mysteries and romances. And then I inherited her love for all the genres of books. And my parents passed away several years ago, and it came to my mind I really wanted to honor them, and I thought I'd like to tell their story because I thought it was fascinating. My mother had, her first love, and it ended tragically, and then my father, who always loved her from the time he first met her, I loved their love story, and I loved telling the story of my grandparents in their funeral business and how my grandfather had gone into the Royal Rod Fishing Company. So, I wanted to honor all of them, and that was my inspiration why I wanted to do Evermore.
The book is available wherever books are sold. I'll give you all this information as we go through the conversation and links on our website, thisweekinamerica.us. Margaret's website is fourcousinsmysteries.com. I'll go through that and explain the Four Cousins Mysteries as we go through our conversation today. So would you say the story is fact or fiction, or a combination of fact and fiction?
Well, it's a combination because it's very factual in many, many areas, especially, of course, the setting, which is upstate New York on Owasco Lake in Auburn, which, as I said, I renamed Shimmering Falls.
Yes.
The characters are all real. Every character in the book, whether it be, my Lizbeth or Ian or Joseph or the grandparents, all of those are real characters. I've renamed them. And the incidents that occurred, the major incidents, were real. Now, some of the little events, obviously I didn't know everything that happened. I did invent some of those events. One of them that I was thinking about is Ian's mother, Maureen, in there. He was my mother's first love, and his mother was a very strange lady, and she required that the oldest son must become a priest. And I heard this story from my mother. I never really understood how that could be, but it devastated my mother. And because she was intending to marry him, they were juniors and seniors in high school right after they graduated, and that didn't occur. So I went and I had really the bones, the skeleton of all the story. And when I was 14, I did find my mother's journal where she told the story in more detail. So I got more of this, and then I questioned her. And it was very interesting to hear about her life. And so, it's a romance because, as I said, my father met my mother, and he loved her immediately. He met her when she was 14, and she, of course, was in love with someone else. And so finally, they were married in their early 20s. But it was a triangular, romance.
Yes.
And it had tragedy in it and love and just enduring love. My mother and father were married for 65 years. So it was a beautiful story to tell. And I guess you could say the fiction part of it is some of the characters I had to invent their personalities. And like, for instance, Ian's brothers and sisters, his mother Maureen and her neuroticism, I had to invent that and create some situations around that. But for the most part, it is factual of what happened, and all the characters in there. There's Aunt Sadie and Uncle Charlie. They were definitely real characters who were killed in an auto accident. So I included that in the book. So it's probably a great deal of fact with some embellishments of the characters and the incidents.
Interesting where the story comes from. We're talking about the book Evermore. The author is our guest, Margaret Krivchenia, and that's Kriv as in Victor, Chenia. The book is Evermore. Her website is fourcousinsmysteries.com. Book available at Amazon, the usual places. Direct links onto Margaret's website by going to our website, thisweekinamerica.us. You mentioned the romance part of the story. There's a mystery part of the book as well. Talk about combining the two and developing. It's more than just a love story, isn't it?
It is, because through the romance, there is a secret that Ian and Joseph and Lizbeth share. And it goes throughout the book, and it's only at and it's a very dark secret. It's a secret that she's been hiding for years and years. And finally, in the end of the book, Marianna, who's her daughter, which is actually, I'm the character in real life, Marianna discovers what the secret is. And so it comes full circle, and you begin to understand Lizbeth's effort to control and to never let her daughter go, never let her daughter be far from her, because she lost Ian. She wasn't about to lose Marianna. But you begin to see what happened, and that's the mystery. Why is Lizbeth the way she is, and what has happened to her? So the mystery is finally revealed in the last part of the book.
Tell me about the setting again for the book, the time frame, and the significance. As you're explaining there's a reason you chose the time period and the setting, isn't there?
Well, it is. It starts in the 1930s, really at the outset of World War II in Europe. And it's when my mother and father were growing up. It's when Lizbeth and Joseph and Ian in the story are growing up. So I wanted to set it in Upstate New York, in the Finger Lakes region, where my parents grew up and where I visited every single summer. I was very familiar with that area. I love it. And also it was the area where, my mother and father were married, and where my father, 10 months after they were married, ended up being drafted into World War II, and Mother didn't see him for 3 years. So it was where she heard about Pearl Harbor, was in that area. So I started in the 1930s, and then I traced their story all the way through up into the new millennium, and told about their heartbreaks, their joys, the birth of their child. My mother lost 2 little boys. It goes through all of their life, and how the strength, the resiliency, and the faith that they had that held them up, and made them the way they were. And it's a book about hope and about knowing that you can overcome just about anything.
What was this like for you putting this story together? Again, most of this based on real people, real circumstances, your people, your family circumstances. What was this like for you to put the story of your family together?
Well, it gave me great joy in doing it, but it also was very insightful for me. I learned a great deal about my mother and my father. I always thought I knew them, inside and out. But to go back into their young years, their teenage years, and really research and follow them and read letters and listen, remember stories that my grandmother had told me, I learned a whole lot more about them, and I came to a greater understanding of them and why they acted the way they did. And I gained such respect for their strength and courage for what they went through. And my father in particular, World War II in England, and going through, the bombings and helping to arm the planes and everything for the Normandy invasion, where my husband and I went this summer. He never talked about it. He didn't want to talk about the war, but the more I researched, I realized all the strengths. And as I said, it just opened up them even more to me.
Yes.
And, I love the journey I took.
As you're going through that, I'm thinking, boy, I wish I would have known something about my parents. And, they were both in their 30s when I first met them as a young baby, and I don't know them before that. And maybe we all would know and appreciate our parents more if we had some idea what they went through to get to the point where they brought us into their lives. But it's a fascinating perspective that Margaret has in the book Evermore. Her website is fourcousinsmysteries.com. Book available at Amazon. We'll give you all this on our website as well. How long did it take you to write the book? How long, obviously you've been formulating this for a while, but to actually write the book, how long a process was that?
Almost a year. I started out by doing research. I researched the area in particular, and I researched all about the Indian burial grounds because my mother would talk about going to them, and I researched about World War II, and I always do this before ever I start writing a book. I do a lot of research, and then I just decided on the events. I laid out all the characters I wanted to have, and the events, the time periods, because the book is divided into different sections. Like one section will say 14 years later, and it will go, it will pick up. And then I have, it really starts out in the future, in the year 2003. It starts out there, and then it goes back in time. Because one of the main characters in the story is Isabella, who is, at the very beginning of the book, she's the great-granddaughter of Lizbeth, and she is the one who is so fascinated by her great-grandmother. So she comes into the story, and she is inquisitive and wants to know the story of Lizbeth. And that's where it takes up. And then we flash back to the 1930s and Lizbeth as a teenager, as a 15-year-old. So it was fun to write. It was, as I said, it took time. And I lived the book. I just lived it, whether it was driving the car or whatever I was doing in the house. I would wake up in the middle of the night and I would say, oh my gosh, I can put this in chapter 5. I'm going to change that. So that's how it was. I lived the book.
How challenging, what was the most challenging part of the book? Was there an area that was particularly challenging for you, the writer?
I would say probably the last half where I was in the book. It was easier writing about characters who were, no longer with us and their memories. But when I became Marianna in the book and I had to write about myself, there was a lot of introspection. And there was a lot of putting events in the book. Like I would say, all right, do I want to put this event in the book? But I did in the end because I thought I wanted to be authentic and I wanted to be real of what, happened to me as I was growing up and when I had my children. So, yeah, I would say the last half of the book I really thought a lot about. And then the end, I wanted it to come full circle. I wanted it to be a resolution, and I wanted it to be a satisfying and joyful resolution.
Will there be a sequel?
There is. As a matter of fact, I'm in the middle of writing it right now, and it is going to center around Isabella, the great-granddaughter of Lizbeth. And it's opening up on the Texas-Mexican border, where they are running a home for migrant children. And it's a very turbulent time because it is obviously in the new millennium, where a lot of the drug cartels are very powerful. So it starts there, and Isabella is married, and her husband takes her back to Shimmering Falls because he is afraid of the danger. So it is taking part there. So I do develop a lot of the characters in the new book that I wasn't able really to develop in Evermore. I focus more on them. And so I'm progressing with this story. I have an idea of where it's going, but I really don't want to share it right now.
Well, we'll be checking the website. So when the book is out, we'll be able to get information and order it. The website is fourcousinsmysteries.com. Our guest on the program is Margaret Krivchenia. That's Kriv as in Victor, Chenia. So forget the V, make it an F. That was what was confusing me, was to get rid of the V, make it an F. Krivchenia, the book available wherever books are sold. I mentioned Four Cousins Mysteries here at the few minutes left in the program. Let's talk about that. I love the concept of that. I love where the name came from. Talk about the background of the Four Cousins Mysteries.
Well, it started when my grandson was 2 years old, and he used to spend the night, and he would love me to tell stories. And it started out with, like the rubber duckies, the little duckies in the bathtub, and I would invent a magical forest, and I would tell him all kinds of stories. And then a friend said, you need to write these down. These are really cute. So I did. And then as my grandchildren, I have 4 grandchildren, as they became older, I thought, well, you know what? I love adventure and mystery, and I love Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys. So I'm going to create a mystery series, which is called the Four Cousins Mystery Series, and it's based on my 4 grandchildren. And right now there are 4 books. I started with The Ghost of Canyon Camp, and that's in Yellowstone. It went on to The Haunted Lighthouse, which is set in Sanibel Island. And then the Secret of the Broken Arrow Mine, again, out in the west in Wyoming. And then the 4th was The Case of the Mysterious Mansion, which takes place in Asheville. The latest one that's coming out is going to be called, and it will be coming out hopefully at the end of this month in November, right for the holidays. It's called The Quest for the Cat's Eye Ruby. And that is set in Chimney Rock State Park in North Carolina. And so all of my 4 grandchildren are the main stars of the book. We do have other children we meet along the way. In particular, this last book features 4 children that I've met, and a couple asked if they could be in the book, and I said, okay. So I have put them in the book as friends. So now there's 8 children,
Well,
and it's fun.
Well, I love that. A great story. And in the series, The Four Cousins Mysteries, you mentioned 4. You've got another one you're working on there. And you mentioned the holidays. Boy, these are great gift-giving ideas, as is, of course, Evermore. So if you're looking for something for a holiday gift to gift any time of the year, please keep this in mind. And you can go to Margaret's website, very similar to the name of the series. It's the fourcousinsmysteries.com. Get information there as well. Let's talk a little bit, a few minutes left in the program here. Your inspiration, who do you look up to? Who influences you as a writer? And obviously this goes back to your youth. You mentioned this was something, a trait you shared with your mother at an early age.
Yeah, my mom loved books of all kinds. And even though we didn't have a lot of money at all, but she loved books. So every single holiday or birthday, she gave me books. And so I grew up on books, all the way from, the 8 Cousins to the Brontes, Jane Eyre, and into, Nancy Drew or the Hardy Boys. I loved all those books, and I just continued it. And so, as I said, my mother and my grandmother were great, verbal storytellers. And so I love that. Mom loved to write. She loved to keep journals, and she was an artist, which I do put in Evermore. And so I think I inherited all of that from her, and I just have been lucky enough to be able to put it down on paper and be able to publish the book. So, yeah, I would say I look up to my mom for starting that for me.
You do some children's books as well. We were chatting before we started the conversation here recording, and you've got some children's books you're working on as well?
I do. I have some children's books that are for ages 3 to 5. I haven't taken them to the publisher yet, but they're written. And one was written about my one grandson, and it has to do with the magical forest and the great adventures of Prince Harrison William. And then the other one has to do with Parker and Penny, my younger grandson, Penny, his dog. And it's called The Mystery of the Bat Cave. And that would be for 4 and 5-year-olds. So that's my dream, is to have these published so that I can have books from the age of 3 all the way up to adults.
Well, and again, you can keep track of this by going to Margaret's website, which is fourcousinsmysteries.com. The book we focused on today is Evermore, The Powerful Love Story. The book is available wherever books are sold. Margaret, it's been a pleasure having you on the program. Thank you so much for spending some time with us. Hopefully we can do this again. I love what you're doing, incorporating family members and life stories into the books. Excellent job on Evermore, receiving rave reviews. Thank you for being with us on the program.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Let me just ask you before we go, you are working with Reader's Magnet, self-publishing company, marketing company, on getting the word out about the book Evermore. What's it been like working with them? And I ask that because writing the book is one creative area that you're involved in. Now you have to shift gears and go to being a businesswoman and a marketing person. What's it been like working with Reader's Magnet in getting the word out there of the book?
It's been a wonderful experience. I love their communication. I love their ideas. I love their marketing with the book fairs and especially their Festival of Storytellers once a year. So it's been a really rewarding experience working with them. I look forward to working more with them in the future.
And speaking of book fairs, the book Evermore will be featured upcoming at the 2023 Frankfurt Book Fair. So the book will be there, international in scope. The book Evermore, our guest on the program, Margaret Krivchenia. That's Krivchenia. The website, just remember this, fourcousinsmysteries.com. The name of the book is Evermore. Margaret, thanks again for being with us on the program. Love to do it again. Thank you for spending some time with us.
Thank you.
And all the information on Margaret, our website, direct link to fourcousinsmysteries.com, on our website, thisweekinamerica.us. And we're back on today's program right after these messages.
This Week in America is online. You can visit our website, thisweekinamerica.us. Scott Pinkerton, associate producer of This Week in America. Jay Anderson, segment producer. Ben Watson, webmaster. Otto Bechet, director of engineering and TV production. This Week in America produced and is a trademark of Blue Funk Broadcasting, LLC. For information on all of our guests and to listen to this week's show, our website again at thisweekinamerica.us. And I'm Sean Bratton, executive producer of This Week in America.